Today I'm going to demonstrate how to prime a support to paint on. And the reason that you prime your support, either watercolor paper or canvas, is because you don't want the regular oil or water-soluble oils to get to the paper or the canvas, or it will rot the canvas. There are different types of supports that you can work on for painting. The first one is wood. Artists have painted on wood for many years, and this works very well. You can use oak, that's fine. The problem with wood is when you paint really large, it's going to be very heavy, and wood also cracks and warps over time. Artists also use masonite to paint on, and masonite is wood fibers that have been shot at a surface. They bind back together into it's called hardboard. It's best to work on 1/4 inch hardboard. It also comes in 1/8 inch, but that warps a lot easier. Artists also paint on plywood, and a ply is one layer of wood, and then they'll glue another layer of wood onto it, and then glue another layer of wood onto it. And usually use Baltic birch to paint on, an interior plywood. Artists also work on canvas. Canvas has a texture to it. This is linen, which is more expensive, and this is cotton, which is less expensive, which students usually work on. Canvas became very popular because Venice was a big textile port, and so it's easier, more lightweight to work on large paintings on canvas. This is just the back of canvas. And then artists will also work on canvas board. Canvas board is just canvas that's been glued onto cardboard. This is fine for practicing, and it's fine for small paintings, but it tends to warp on larger paintings, so I would just do it for practice. Traditionally, artists would prime their canvas with animal skin glue or rabbit skin glue. So what this is just granules of rabbit skin. And what you would do is put that into a double boiler, and you put water in the bottom so it doesn't scorch. You put the granules in here and let it soak into water for a while. Then you heat it up. You try not to boil it because that will make the glue weaker. And then you brush it onto your canvas. It's a real hassle to do this method. It's a two-step method. What you need to do then is use, they used to use lead white paint and to paint the canvas white after they would put the glue on, and lead white has lead in it, and so it's toxic. So most contemporary artists now use this acrylic polymer gesso because it's both steps in one, and you don't have to go through the whole process of boiling it. I'm going to show you how to prime a canvas. So here's some gesso here. And you can just use a 1.5 inch or 2 inch brush. You can go all in one direction, or you can go in many directions. And I also like to gesso onto the side of my canvas. This seals the staples so they won't rust as much. It also will make your canvas tighter. And then if you do get oil paint onto the side of your painting, it won't rot the canvas. And some students like to paint on the side of their canvases. Generally, one coat is good. I like to get the canvas up off of the table on some black trays so it doesn't stick to the paper. So I would do this entire canvas then. What I do is I'll put the canvas up to the window and see if there's any spots that I missed. And if there is, then I might put a second coat onto the canvas. But usually one coat is fine. And then the gesso brush can just be washed with water, lukewarm water. If you're working on plywood, you can just buy this at the lumber yard. They do make plywood that comes already braced or cradled. This is, however, more expensive. You can brace it or cradle it yourself if you want to. Now, plywood has a fairly, it doesn't have a glossy surface. And so you can just gesso right onto the plywood. Masonite, however, has a fairly glossy surface. So what you want to do is take some sandpaper and sand that down so it has a fuzzy surface, and that will help the gesso to adhere to the masonite a lot better. Again, with masonite, you can buy it already cradled, but that's more expensive, so you can do your own if you want to. And finally, what I'd like to do, you can also paint on paper. This is a 140-pound watercolor paper. You can tell the front of the paper because it has arches here and an infinity sign. On the front of the paper, it's smoother, and on the back of the paper, it's rougher. You can paint on either side. It's totally your personal preference. What I'm going to do is staple it to this plywood, and I varnish the plywood. That will help so the moisture doesn't go into the board. If the moisture goes into the board, it takes longer for it to dry. So I'm going to center this here. I'm going to use a staple gun, and I'm going to start in the middle. And I'm not going to put a lot of pressure when I staple. This will make it easier to get the staples out later on. It also helps if the staple gun is flat on the surface, like this. It helps to give you a little more pressure. So I just go around the paper, and I put a staple about every 1.5 inches. And I go all the way to the corners. It's important that you go all the way to the corners, otherwise sometimes the corners will curl up when you gesso it. So I'm just going to go here to this one corner, but I would do staples around the whole paper, and then I'll take some masking tape and put my name on here because everybody's will look pretty much the same. Then you're going to gesso to the inside of the staples. And again, generally one coat will be fine. You don't want to goop up the gesso on the edges of the paper because that will seal it, and then it will take longer to dry. This will usually dry in 1 day or half a day. So go to the inside of the staples. Some students will just let the edges of their painting be rough. That's totally fine. Or after you gesso this, you can use the blue painter's tape and make a straight edge if you want to. And I would be putting this all the way around the inside. And what you're going to need to do is take masking tape and just put it across the corner, because sometimes the blue painter's tape releases too easily, and then you'll come in the next day and it will be off. So this will help to keep it on your painting. This will make nice sharp edges on your painting. When the painting is all done, all you need to do is take a screwdriver and gently rock it back and forth to lift those staples up. It's really important that you get every staple up, because if you leave one and then you go to tear your paper off, sometimes it'll tear the paper in half. You also want to make sure that you do this gently and slowly. You can also use a needle nose pliers to get this off, but you don't want to gouge your painting after you've worked on it for a couple weeks. And that is all there is to priming a painting surface.